let's start with the important dates, and some of the slides you already seen them before, and we talked about the dates for the terms and conditions, the first payment, last payment. We went through the expected start date and end date. Was there a question or some noise?
No.
No.
But they need to put themselves in mute, please.
All right. We can continue. And we went ahead and we talked about dates for postings, and we touched upon other type of dates, but we haven't got into the dates related to lease modification, to lease events, and what we call in Nakisa the effective date. And I presented this slide before, but I think it's important that we talk a little bit the way that Nakisa is treating lease events, and why is it important that you are aware of all these details. So when you prepare your lease modification, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is when exactly the system is going to apply that lease modification. So the effective date in Nakisa is simply, and we do call it like that, but it's simply the date when the lease event is applied, when the schedules are being recalculated, taking into consideration the new terms and conditions, the changes that you make. So one of the things with the effective date is that it cannot be before a previous event. So if ever, as we are now in October, if ever you applied an event in October, but then you receive notice that there was another event, let's say a supplemental or an adjustment to the lease amount that happened in September, you won't be able to simply go back in time and recognize it in September. So there are ways of treating these type of catching up entries, and we touch upon that subject, and if needed, we'll get back to it in some other session. But pretty much, and like in accounting, the dates and the way you think about the dates is really like looking at a river. It goes into one direction, calendaristically speaking. So you need to follow that sequence. Of course, as I mentioned, there are always ways to do adjustment, catching up entry, but bottom line, if you are in October, let's say, this is the period when you will need to apply the event. And with that in mind, the effective date, the lease modification happens in a period where you haven't posted any of your periodical transactions. So it's as you want to see it, an open period. Again, we are in October, we are on the 16th of October, so we can safely presume that the periodical transactions are maybe posted are maybe posted a little bit later in the month. So you have the period open, you can apply the modification. And this is our recommended approach, that you perform your lease modification, you perform your entries. I'm sorry, I have to cough. I'll put myself on mute for a second. Autumn season always comes with its perks, so it brought me a cough. Sorry, coming back to the effective date and the lease modification. As I was saying, when you apply the event, you need to choose a period that it's open from your accounting point of view, a period where you haven't posted your periodical transaction, and by that I mean the payments, accruals, and the asset depreciation. Then, of course, you need to think of the term that you are entering. So you enter a term that either starts on that month or starts in the future. That's why the ROU start date, and by that we mean of the new term, it has to be in the period that you are choosing or in the future. And we're going to talk about advanced arrears, but I'm going to show you precisely in the schedule. And I have here a slide, and we're gonna look through this into more detail through the example. So when you look at your schedules, you will understand why you need to choose a certain effective date. And it all starts with your first column is in the all column schedule, the accrual period that are in fact the dates for your payments, the payment periods if you want. So this is the very first thing that the system takes into consideration. However, there is not your accounting period. Your accounting period is always your fiscal period. So in a lot of situations, depending on your fiscal variant, that would be further down the line. So we will walk through those details for you to understand, for you to have clear in mind. And I know all of you know a lot of these things, but depending on the complexity of the contract, sometimes it's harder to see. And I'm insisting on that because I do think it's important for you and for your users to understand how exactly the system works, so you can effectively apply the modification. And I left in here some other details for you to come back to, but with that, we can go back to the application and look into an example. So let me know if there are any questions so far, and if you have any comment, any doubts, I'll be happy to address those. And if I'm not able right now, we'll get back to you. So I'm switching my screen to our application. I hope you can still see my screen. I'm taking
Yes,
that as a yes. I have here an example that I have prepared. So I have a base rent. I introduced a cash incentive in February, and I posted all my transactions, and I'm gonna show you that specifically our postings. So let me make this bigger so everybody can see. So I made all the transaction up to the end of September. This is only trying to mimicking a real life situation. We are in October, so the assumption is that everything is posted up to September. So let me switch back for a moment in all columns view, so I can walk you through the accrual period. So what I have here is a contract, whereas the payment date is on the 20th. And when your payment date is on the 20th, and when you are paying in advance, and remember, advance arrear, it's a key information for the present value calculation. That's why it's so important. But for certain, depending on the complexity, as I said, it might be confusing. But what I want you to remember is that all you need to remember is the beginning of your accrual period. So your period start date, as you look in here, that's what the system is going to propose you as the effective date. And why is that? Is because with every adjustment you are targeting a period. Like in this example, I made an event on period 3. And this, in fact, if I scroll a little bit to my right to get to the month end closing, I'll see from an accounting, from a fiscal perspective, this is my period end. It's February 28th. And in fact, the information for that will serve as the base for accounting is in the month-end outputs, and the period end date from an accounting perspective is in here. And you can see, well, this is what I was targeting as an accounting period. So it was from the 1st until the 20th of February. But from a payment perspective, because I'm paying on the 20th, my period is not overlapping with my accounting period. So it starts on the 20th of February and ends on the 19th of March. If I would have payment in arrear, my period will be the next day after my payment, but the same rule will apply. The system will always propose to you the period start date of your targeted period. And with that in mind, and because I posted all the entries up to the end of September, let's proceed to perform an event for this contract. And in order to do that, I'm going at the level of the contract. And once you have these rules very clear in mind, you can make use of the mass list modification, for example, and that's where the effective date becomes a bit problematic if you're not comfortable with the rules. So the reason I'm showing this through a simple example is because then you can extend the same logic to mass operations. From the level of the contract and from the three dots, I'm starting a list modification. And as I'm doing that, I'm being prompted to this window and I'm being prompted to choose an amendment date. The amendment date is a date that doesn't have any impact on the calculation or on any other transaction. So it doesn't have a financial or accounting impact. So this is simply the date when you perform the event, and it's just for your audit trail. So I can say, well, I can put the today's date, and this is really a user choice. In the reason code, I have all the type of choices that I have. I want to introduce a new term, so I am going to choose addendum to contract new terms. Then we have the modify contract rate. You might remember with our latest version, we introduced a switch for you to set up this as you wish. By default, in this particular version, I have modify contract rate checked, meaning that if I let it like this, the system will also allow me to modify the contract rate, but it is still my choice to uncheck it. So I do not want to modify the contract rate. If I have a contract that is using IBR, I will have that choice later at the send to assessment at the activation group level. So I filled in all the information. I can put something in the description for me to get back to it. So let's say add payment adjustment, for example, and I'm going to add a supplemental. I can add something. Keep in mind, and you might remember this information, you will be able to retrieve it in your DQI as long as you are in the latest version. So I'm clicking submit, and the system is going to create a draft for me to add the new terms and conditions so I can proceed with the list modification. We did talk about the amendment date last time to just let you know that this is a date with no impact onto the schedule. So I hope that one is clear. I have my draft open. I can follow it clearly because I have a different color. And I see that the version is draft. I'm following the trail of little pencils, so I'm going to the list component to add my new term. I'm going to choose a standard term. As I said, I want to apply a payment adjustment, so I'm choosing a supplemental. Let's say I have to pay $300 more per month and for a limited period. And I'm going to choose one time frequency. So this is the base for my lease amount calculation, and how often am I paying this is monthly. Now I have to choose my dates, and I'm going to start with the expected start date. I'm in October, and this is a term that I've been made aware of in October. So I'm starting with that, and I'm going to put the end date. So these two dates should be based on your actual legal document. It's something that you have, or it was communicated through some other department. So let's say I have this new term that is valid for 6 months. I'm required to pay more for 6 months. In terms of the payment, supplemental is an overlapping term. I'm overlapping with an existing term. But because it's an additional payment, I can opt for For other frequency, I can have a one time, for example, or I don't need to follow the exact same frequency as the base rent. If you have a reduction, of course, you need to keep in mind you cannot reduce something that it's not there, so you need to follow the payment dates of the original base rent. And my base rent was mm, considering payments on the 20th. So I'm in October. So my first payment will be October 20th. So I'm going to choose that. And for the last payment date, this being simply a settlement, I can go with the end of my contract. So I had something changed on me here. So I can use the same as the end of my contract. I can put it here. It's simply a cutoff date. It's not an actual payment date. And with that, I entered my term, I enter my supplemental, and now I can approve this at the contract level. Sending to approval as and approve as I'm a power user here. And now I can move to the activation group level following the little pencil, the supplemental. I need to mention whether it's likely or not likely to exercise. As I mentioned that this is starting on the 1st of October, the assumption is this, that I want to exercise it right away. If it would have been something in the future, I would still have the choice to move on and exercise it later. And now I'm sending it to assessment, and this is where we have our effective date. And you can see, for example, I can't go backwards. I can't go to September because the first open period is October. And I have the 20th in green because that's the beginning of my period. This is what the system is suggesting for effective date, and simply because it's the beginning of my accrual period. So I'm going to choose October 20th. For the posting date, this is up to the user choice, and this will be the date that the system is going to consider, depending. If you remember, we talked last time about the rules for translation. So depending on what are those rules and what do you need to have if you are connected to SAP, your posting date needs to consider that. And of course, it needs to consider whether you are in an open accounting period. So the system, what it's suggesting is today's date, but I can change it for, let's say, 1st of October. And the document date, again, it's up to the user. The system will be suggesting the same as the effective date, but bottom line, the document date can be used for other purposes like translation, if you remember what we discussed last time, but also you can use it for your reconciliation to track down certain transactions. So with that, I'm clicking submit. We're still in draft, and at this point, what we want to check is the schedules. So I'm moving to the schedules, and I'm going to switch to all columns view. And I'm going to leave just the year 2023. And you can see already that we have the green line here in October. We can see the supplemental, and it's going beyond the period 11. So maybe let's switch to all years so I can show it to you. Remember that I introduced the supplemental for 6 months, so I can see it here. But if I scroll to my right, getting into what it is, the basis for accounting recognition, I will see that the system is considering October period for the adjustment. And if I scroll even further, I'll be able to see the adjustments for the asset and for the liability. They're in the exact same amount. It's only normal. And I'll be able to see the change for my gross book value. And I do expect to see a change in my depreciation following the event. So I am okay. I'm happy with the result. and now I can move on to approve and complete the event. I don't want to keep more time because we have more interesting subjects, but I wanted to walk you through these elements, through these details. So let us know if you have questions, if dates for events, for postings are still troublesome for you. We'll be happy to touch on similar subjects. So let me know if you have questions right now, or we can move to talk about impairments.